So looking forward to today. I have been hardly able to sleep because I'm so excited. I have two of my friends here today. They are also happen to be plaintiffs in the lawsuit against Bill Gothard, IBLP, ATI, the Dugga cult. And so today we're going to be talking with them about the recovery journey. And I know a lot of our conversation here has been about shiny, happy people, and it's been about the impacts of these teachings and how they have impacted people's lives, how they're impacting the church. But sometimes we don't ever think about what happened to those people that were impacted. What was that journey like for them to be able to overcome? Maybe you know people that have overcome it, but what was that process like? Like, how did they walk through that? And so today, we're going to share a little bit more of our journey, and they're also going to offer some hope to you as well. And Rachel here has gone back to college, and we're actually going to celebrate her graduation here soon. And so she has some really awesome tips. I wouldn't say tips, but really awesome ways that even for single mothers, like ways you can go back to school or what that may look like in pursuing education. And Charis has some really awesome things to say too, and has walked her own journey of all of us walked a journey of deep suffering. So I'm excited. I'll let y'all go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell who you are, and let's get started. Rachel, you can go first. I put you on the spot.
Oh, okay. You made my face big. I'm Rachel Frost, and I live just south of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I have 5 kids, ranging in age from almost 21 to 9. So quite a big gap. 4 boys, and then we got a surprise girl at the end. So she keeps me on my toes. I'm married to someone who also grew up in ATI and went through the ALERT program. He was in ALERT 1, if anyone is familiar with that. It was mentioned on Shiny Happy People, kind of the military prep program. And we met at an ATI church where I was a nanny. And that was almost, well, let's see, we met probably 25 years ago, and we're coming up on our 22nd anniversary. I know, it's been a long time. Should I just stop there? Is that like a good intro? And then
yes, you were in a book too. Tell them about the book. I posted it. You and Charis both were in the book.
Yes, and a lot of people. Like there were just a lot of people in that book. Disobedient Women by Sarah Stankorb. That just released, was it last week, Charis?
Mm-hmm. Last week.
Yeah. In production, she was writing it for quite a while, I think maybe 2 years. And she reached out probably a year and a half ago, wanting to know more about the Gothard story and what propelled us to come forward and share our stories. And I was in the middle of my bachelor's degree and feeling really overwhelmed and like, I don't think this is a good time to interview, maybe later. And she kept circling back, and then it just felt right to tell my story in it. And I know several others have too, to kind of give a more robust understanding of how different people decided to enter the lawsuit, and what it took to come forward and kind of go against that obedient mindset that we were all brought up to adhere to, and to stay within very strict confines of how that was defined for us. And so not only to buck against what you feel is a cultural norm in this circle, but also to find my voice. I'll make it personal. To find my voice when before I felt like it was wrong to say anything against an authority, or at least very uncomfortable. Like, you can only pray, and God can deal with him. And so it was definitely a series of events and understanding and eye-opening that led me to the place of entering the lawsuit. And maybe go into that a little bit later too. I don't want to monopolize here because you have to meet Mrs. Barker.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So that's a funny story.
We'll get to that. I can tell you how she got that true nickname.
Yes.
I always know someone has read that story if they call me by that name. So because no one else ever calls me Mrs. Parker. And when they do, I don't know who they're talking to. I'm like looking around for my mother-in-law.
Right.
But yeah, I'm Charis Barker. So I was one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against Gothard. I'm married. My husband and I got married in 2002. So we've been together for 21 plus years. We met a long time before then. So we've known each other about 30 years. And we have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. And entering a new phase of parenthood as one's graduated, one's in her senior year, and one's still in middle school. So it's definitely looking different for us now. It's been a journey to go through all of this, and I was thinking back over just preparing my thoughts and getting my head wrapped around all the things we're going to be talking about today, and just kind of going back over that journey and the different people that have played a role in that, in helping my understanding and also support as we've walked through that, and how many people have made up that tribe, and just how special it's been. Like you, Rachel, being called disobedient or speaking up against someone in authority went against everything that was within me. And for my husband and I, it was a good 10 years of studying and learning about what the Bible really said, what human nature is really like, and what, honestly, just what our social norms are, before we were willing to stand up and say anything. And then after that, it was a few more years before the lawsuit happened, and things have just drastically changed. When you speak up, things really change. And that has, but it's led to some really good things for our family. Hard things, stretching things, but good things overall.
Yes. And I'm moving myself here. So random tidbit, I actually met Charis when I was 19 or 18. I was 19 and she was newly married and pregnant at the time, I think. We were at a program for young girls.
I remember that the other day. I think we were in Dallas, wasn't it?
Yes, we were in Dallas. We met. We had no clue that someday we were going to meet again. 13 years down the road. Stories. And I just love what you both share about bucking the culture, really. I mean, it took everything, I think, within us to really challenge systems. I know for me, I first began discovering and challenging the system because, one, I was desperate for some answers to why I was hurting so bad, what was happening. I was just at my wit's end as far as pain in my heart. I was crying out to God, and we all connected by, I believe, recoveringgrace.org, which is kind of where it all started, where people were talking about and exposing the true story of the Bible and grace, and people started telling stories, and people started telling stories of sexual harassment from Bill Gothard. And I was like, first I was like, no way, I don't believe this. I'm just going to stay far away. And then I read Meg's story, and that was it for me. I was like, oh my goodness, I had a personal connection with her through Bill Gothard. Crazy story. Reading a letter from her several years ago and knew something was wrong between them. And so at that point, you stand between a choice and a hard place. I had just written Bill Gothard a letter of gratefulness 2 days before I read her story because I was desperate and I didn't know how to get out of pain other than writing a letter of gratefulness.
Right.
Things, and it's just like, well, this isn't working, so maybe I need to think outside.
Well, because that was a teaching. That was what we were told to do to somebody who had offended you, or that you were struggling to forgive, or with an offense. That was an actual teaching in the advanced seminar, I believe, letters of gratefulness to offenders. And it was, there's actual material, you need to praise this person publicly. You need to write letters of gratefulness. So I think all 3 of us, if not everybody in the lawsuit, had at one time written letters of gratitude to him at various times of his spiritual involvement in our lives.
Now, I will say, I think I'm the odd one out there.
You never did.
Charis is like, nope.
I remember even inviting them to my wedding, even after I
wedding too. That was like a big deal if he came to your wedding. He actually blessed me in my foreign marriage. He put him through the ringer. And that was like a huge deal.
All I got was a clock, Lauren.
Yes, I got to talk to. It has since been kindling, but yeah, but I think, I know that was brought up even in the lawsuit, all our letters of gratefulness as somehow proof that we were lying or that had changed our story. But that was a snapshot in time of how we thought and how we processed things, how we assumed to get over this feeling of being wronged, we had to bless, our offender, and obedience. That is what was pounded into us. And so it does not tell the story arc, right, of new understanding and how you realize that this was not actually helpful to you.
Yes.
And this supposed investment in your life was actually oppression. And you just didn't have words for it then.
Yes. Yes.
So I feel like that's something probably from a similar playbook of a lot of abusers. They will hold on to. And I think what was shocking for all of us is the volume of letters he referenced from hundreds, if not thousands, of girls. So even in the lawsuit, in one of the exhibits, it said these were all the letters that Rachel Frost wrote him, and 2 of them weren't even from me. They were from some other Rachel, and then I think Rachel Lee's and me. He got mixed up our letters because we had similar handwriting. So kind of creepy that somebody would keep letters from young girls like forever for maybe a specific purpose to like gaslight them later.
Oh yeah, along with their photos somewhere in that box.
Yes, I know Rachel Lee's has mentioned that he kept photos of her and Meg. That was Rachel Lee's, correct? That was
Rachel Lee's. Yes.
So that's who you saw write her story, and it impacted you. For me, it was Charlotte, who has since been open about her real name. So I feel it's fine to say that was Gretchen. And she's actually the one who headlines our whole lawsuit as, the plaintiff name, Gretchen Wilkinson versus IBLP and Gothard. And she was the one who changed everything for me, because I had heard about RG. I'd heard about the stories going on, and I was kind of like, no, don't want to know. It's like I knew something was there. I acknowledged even maybe what my body felt about it, and I did not want to know anything. Even before that, someone tried to give me Don Vigneault's book, A Matter of Basic Principles. And I handed it right back to them. I'm like, I don't want to even read this, even though I had this gnawing sense that things were not right. And he was way outside his bounds with me. I just did not want to even look at it squarely and process it. It's like willful ignorance.
Well, there's something to be said for that, though, because I think one of the things that's come up for me as I've talked with different people and talked with therapists and things like that is once you know,
yes,
you can't unknow.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people have stayed away from knowing.
Absolutely.
Because if they know, they can't claim that they didn't. And I identify with that to a large extent. I mean, we didn't want to know, but in the same way, like once you do know, like for me with the lawsuit, and like once I knew and I was solid in my belief and understanding of what had happened, at first it was theological because I didn't understand it was sexual abuse until much later. But from a theological perspective, some of the twistings and stuff, then it was like I had no problem speaking up, because what else do you do in that situation? I was compelled to. Like
yes.
It had to come out. There was no way to hold it back. But I do think that it does hold a lot of people back. They just don't want to know because they can't ignore it then.
That is so true, Charis.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was for me too. Then when someone finally sent me the link to RG with Charlotte Gretchen's story, and they said, "Do you know this girl?" And I I opened it and I read it. I just instantly fell apart because I recognized her. She was a roommate, and there was some angst in our roommate situation, and some like subtle or even not so subtle competition for Gothard's affection. And I didn't know her whole story. I just felt this kind of competition because he pitted people against each other. He specifically told me that, she had issues or whatever, and to not share anything with her, but to report to him, what she shared. So he immediately made us suspicious of each other, even as housemates. Like, why would you put two people together that you also wanted to pit against each other? But now it makes sense. That is what he did. Mm-hmm. But then to see her story with more clarity, it put so many pieces of the puzzle together for me. And I couldn't not know it anymore. To Charis's point, it just, I was just confronted with the truth. Mm-hmm. And I knew I had to do something about it. And my body was screaming, there's so much more here, Yes. Yeah.
That is powerful. And I love what you're saying about how your body just starts screaming and your body knew the truth the whole time. And the truth is scary and the truth is hard because when you face the truth, you have to do something. Living in a delusion is our defense mechanism of, okay, we don't want to admit our body is screaming out something's wrong with this man. It screamed out the whole time I was there for me. But that was really scary to buck. You got to realize, buck our whole family system, buck our whole culture, buck our church, and to state this man is, my body's right. So we suppressed our body and everything.
There was no avenue to do so. There was no, he created an atmosphere of suspicion for everybody else. Like he like officially sanctioned me to be his spy. He wanted me to tell him about other people at headquarters who were living up.
Yes.
Right? I mean, he didn't he didn't use that word, but that was the understanding, that I be his eyes and ears, Yeah. So it made everyone suspicious of everyone else, but there was no avenue to confide about anything about him that you felt uncomfortable with. Plus the teachings were very convenient at that time of don't share a bad report, don't listen to a bad report. So you had no avenue. I remember people hearing things about people going home under shame and suspicion, and maybe not really good friends at that time, but at least acquaintances. And I'd feel sad about it, but also very cautious to know, you hear a little rumor of some unjust whatever, but not wanting to get involved because you can't sin and take up an offense for someone who God has not given you grace to deal with, because that's was told you. Yes. And it kept us in islands of oppression, and we didn't find each other until social media made that possible, and RG made that possible, to know that we weren't alone in these situations. And that's how I found you all. And it's just like Charis said, it's been a beautiful building of a tribe of women and some men, from RG, and getting to know some of our spouses and all. That has been such a beautiful support system. And I don't know that I would have been able to get through this situation and speaking up and all, everything that came against us without this tribe.
No, I would be out. So many times it went into their hands. I'm like, I remember you calling me during the whole sanction, which I kept calling defamation lawsuit. It was not a defamation lawsuit. It was a sanctions against us with the $200,000 judgment. I was like, Rachel, you call me like, Lauren, it's going to be okay. Just you're going to be okay. And you're like, just checking on me. And you're like, I see a warrior. You can do this. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I want out. I want out.
We all had those time periods though. It wasn't like I was always strong. Rachel Lee's and Charis helped out so much too, and like holding me up when I was like falling. And I think that's the beautiful thing. Like, you came forward because of Meg's story. I came forward because of Gretchen's story. Charis, I think you mentioned Lizzie, or seeing Lizzie's story. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that was all part of it. It was it was interesting because I had discovered a couple years earlier than that I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
There had been some online, it was the days before Facebook.
Right.
We had some forums for alumni, and I had found out then I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person who had experienced Gothard touching me. But knowing he touched me was very different from understanding what he had done.
Yes.
And that was, because I immediately told my parents, I'm like, he's touching me and I don't like this. This is very uncomfortable. And they were like, well, it's not a big deal. We went through this whole thing. And so I didn't tell anyone at headquarters. I did have people I trusted that I could have talked to that were there for a brief time. But my parents had said it wasn't a big deal. And I didn't know what sex was. So, and I certainly had no idea what fetishes were and all of those things. So, but I did know that he had touched me and I was uncomfortable. And then when those forums got going, when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I get really sick when I'm pregnant. So I was like on the couch throwing up all day long. And so I discovered online forums and a lot of more mothering tips and parenting tips and all that stuff too. But a larger group of us, we'd start talking about theology and then start our experiences. And quite a few girls said, it sure did make me feel uncomfortable when he touched me. And then, no, he touched you too. And then, at some point when I got married, I realized that it had sexual connotations. I didn't realize that. And then even then, knowing it was sexual it never occurred to me that it was abuse until much later. And then later on, during the lawsuit, even it was mortifying during conversations with our attorneys to find out that him exposing himself to me was also considered part of that. And I was like, I just thought he was rude. Like
I did too. I thought maybe he had a problem.
You just don't know where to look. Like you're sitting in his office. You're just like
through his clothes to be specific. Through his, it wasn't
there because we know people are watching this to watch us to see what we say.
Right. Right.
He was clothed.
Yes.
But he obviously enjoyed making me uncomfortable, and without me knowing what I was seeing, it was just it was a long process to understand. Not only was it uncomfortable, but then of course the whole process of understanding that and working through that, telling my story was part of that recovery process. It was part of the processing. So when Lizzie told her story, I was like, well, I have a story I'm happy to tell because I had told it to a couple of people. In fact, when I published my story, and I did publish it under a pseudonym, my name, Charis, is the Greek word for grace. And so I made it very easy for Gothard to be able to find me, but I didn't want it necessarily searchable by my name at that point because I wasn't sure of the reaction. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that yet. Our tribe was still in its infancy, if even conceived yet. So it was one of those things. But I had people reach out to me because they're like, you do know it's very easy to tell who you are if we've known each other for any length of time. So, and that particular person that I'm thinking of had seen my post on a forum, like just talking about it years ago. And so she knew exactly what it was because my story had stayed the same.
Yeah. And this was before Me Too, right? This was before the official.
Me Too. It was before Church Too. It was before.
Right.
That
we didn't have that backing of like a whole movement behind us that we knew of. I know it started even back 2006 with Tarana Burke. But it wasn't, we felt very vulnerable coming forward with this in our circles. Cause even though I didn't want to process it, I still had a lot of acquaintances from that time period. And I think it was kind of like just, a lot of people just plowed forward, right? With life, you get married, your kids, and then some event, either having kids and then confronting do I homeschool? Do I public school? Or what kind of church do I go to? Or a parent or a partner who maybe even didn't grow up that same way, challenging you and making you think in different ways. Kara, since you and I both married like ATI guys, well, and I think Lauren, you did too.
Yes, we all three did.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an understanding there that you don't have to like, let me try to explain. They get it, but also you have to fight together to move forward and both agree to move forward. And I'm really thankful. The same direction.
Yes.
Hopefully at the same time. And so that has been a process too for my husband and I to process it at the same time. So
that's been a huge part of our recovery too, is learning. For me, it was learning how to work together as a couple, and know what marriage really was. I went into marriage thinking it was going to be really hard because I was told I was going to have a hard time submitting and all these different things. And it wasn't like that, because that's not how my husband has ever treated me. He's always treated me as an equal, and he found freedom before I did. In many ways anyway. And he very much wanted me to not homeschool, but I was so scared.
Yes.
I was scared of not homeschooling, what I would have to deal with. It wasn't so much of putting them in school that I was scared of. It was the aftermath of what would happen, what I would have to endure as criticism from other people, because I was still pretty tightly tied to that community. I mean, we were in a small town in an ATI church, so everyone supported the system.
Right.
I mean,
It's hard.
So.
And I think too, something you're mentioning about is our listeners to understand our background is that sex education in this was nothing. So like that's something our lawyers started pointing out, is that we don't even realize what we don't know. We don't even realize how brainwashed we've been in these teachings. So this created a whole system of being able to exploit young girls on their innocence. They don't even know what fetishes are, as she's saying, or somebody's rubbing their foot up your leg, and you're like, is this an accident or what's happening to you? And I did tell somebody that I felt uncomfortable with Bill Gothard alone in the room. I went to a counselor that was a marriage counselor. And I said, I feel alone with Bill Gothard. When I feel alone with Bill Gothard, I feel afraid, and I have these thoughts hit my mind. I don't even have words to express that. I'm sensing vibes coming at me. All I know is I'm having thoughts and I don't know what to do. She goes, you know why? And I go, why? She goes, because you never told your dad details of every single thought you've ever had. And I'm like, so that's what I need to do? And she's like, yes, and they'll go away. Ew. So I did every single detail of my entire thought life, thinking I was going to be delivered. And then when I wasn't, I thought something was even worse wrong with me. So I was taught anything wrong with me, anything going on in my life is always look within yourself. Find a way to bless others. Find a way to be better.
Full stop for a second. Not all therapists are created equal.
Yes.
That's not right.
Was this a therapist or was this just a counselor from ATI?
I'm just trying not to say their name, but yes, it's a counselor. Like we had our own counselor. So when I met Bill Gothard, I told him about my sexual abuse in the background and was help. And he said, the first thing he said to me is, I'm so glad you never got therapy. A therapist would have ruined you. It would have ruined your mind and you and I would never be able to connect together. ATI taught us to hate therapy, hate public schools. They will ruin us.
Psychology. Everything. Like, no, I love psychology because all of it. Yes. An understanding of it.
Recognizing their tactics if we actually had someone point them out.
Yes. I love psychology too. But yes, we were everything was stripped from us as far as vocabulary and the ability to express who we are. And we're taught to be afraid of anybody and everybody on the outside. They're going to corrupt us. They're going to ruin our hearts. Don't talk to them. Don't tell them anything. So you've created an isolated bubble that no friends outside of our group, no mentors, nobody looking in. It was the perfect place for predators to hide. And it was a perfect place for us to be abused. Because we
another side note, Lauren, what was so interesting is this was happening real time during the lawsuit as well of our understanding of terms. I mean, not just a few times, but several times, like I was processing real time what the lawyer was saying, what happened to you fit this category. And I was like, I just was having to wrap my head around putting a term with the true, because it'd always been blanketed with inappropriateness or mistake.
Grandfatherliness.
Yes. Or defraud. And
Right.
like, there was no, there needed to be actual terms used, harassment. I don't know if I could say the R word on YouTube, but assault, sexual assault, these things happened, and they had to be acknowledged that they were actual crimes. So I know that was part of the defense, throwing stuff back at me and splicing sentences in the sanctions, because in private messages, I was struggling to understand definitions that my attorney said, this is what your experience fits. And it just seemed hard to be, maybe often women who might call the peace, they might reject the term that they were actually abused. Like, this is domestic abuse. What you are experiencing is abuse. And that is just really hard to wrap your head around, something that you aren't allowed to have that truth for yourself, And so I think our lawsuit was messy because we're human and we were messy, but not for 1 minute do I regret going forward for something that drug out so long and took so much from me. I'll just speak for myself, but I know you all could say the same. Took so much from me with time and energy and emotion. My family paid the price for that too, this is heavy on mom, and they supported that. But it weighed on our whole family as sacrifice to speak up. And the thing is, we know that those of us in the lawsuit, we're not the only one, right? So I don't want to get any accolades or be in some platform of like, the only brave people to accuse Gothard, because there were so many others who contemplated joining, and there's so many factors that need to come together if you were in a right place to push this forward. And I will say it's not for everyone to go forward with a lawsuit, because it's intense in so many levels, and you have to decide if this is right for you, right? And in the end, it wasn't right to continue. The toll it was paying on us individually, the threatened lawsuit coming at us, the just emotional and mental toll of everything. It was a lot, and we'd fought the good fight at that point, and it was really hard to get that many people to agree on everything. But it was well worth it.
Yes, absolutely. I would do it again. I mean, not really. I mean, I would go back and do it again, but do not want to sign up for that again. It was extremely, like you said, taxing on my life, but it was also the thing that I needed to push me and propel me to examine things, begin to put vocabulary to words. I was married when I went to the lawsuit. And by the time I got to court with Bill Gothard, I was separated and going home to file divorce a week later, because I had to go in my life and look at a lot. And when I started pulling out things from the lawsuit, I was like, oh yeah, they were all there with me, watching me. And I'm like, this is what's happening. Help me, and like, we're all going back and forth, just like processing together. We had each other. And it was, it's scary because you don't really know what's coming out. But I knew I just was at a place that I no longer could live in denial. Like, I knew I was not going to make it. I was like, I can't mentally, physically, emotionally make it anymore. I've got to find the truth, because the truth will set me free.
Yes.
And it did. And the truth comes at a high cost, and it's a high price to pay, but it's worth it. It's worth every bit of it. And so, it's just, I love what you said.
Well, it costs a lot, but I think it gave each of us a new confidence in, I didn't start off being like, I'm going to take back my life and all this. My life was okay. I had a happy marriage. I had 3 children that I adored, but it made me confront who I really was in a lot of ways and what I really wanted out of life.
Yeah.
In the middle of that whole process, that's when we decided to stop homeschooling, and I became a licensed real estate agent. And then, like, as I've moved into now, like, business coaching and things like that, like, it's is different. It's given me confidence to be able to say, I did some hard things.
Yes.
And I'm still alive. and
Yes.
And it wasn't easy by any stretch. And of course, I mean, that doesn't it didn't give you the tools you need for your next job necessarily, but just giving us, or for me anyway, it was giving me the backbone.
Yeah.
To be able to move forward. And I was trying to explain that. I remember trying to explain some of that to our attorneys, and just like, I feel like my back is growing one vertebrae at a time.
Yeah. Can I tell the quick story of when we saw you like totally reclaim? So this, if people were wondering why she got Mrs. Barker, why we worship her for this, during her cross-examination on the stand with Gothard's bulldog of an attorney, he was just horrible in a lot of ways. He was demeaning and intimidating, and purposely rude, and he could not get Charis's name right for the life of him. He seemed really confused about what her name was, because her first name is Elizabeth Charis Barker, correct? So he was like, do I call you Elizabeth? Do I call you Lizzie? Which kind of meant he maybe thought she was.
He thought I was Lizzie.
Yeah, he thought you were. And he was like checking his notes, and Gothard was whispering at him, like, call her Lizzie or something like that. And so then he finally was like, well, ma'am, I think it's rude to call you ma'am. How would you like me to address you? And I'll address you. And Charis, just all calm as a cucumber up on the stand. And she's like, you may address me as Mrs. Barker. And we were all like, oh, we love you, Mrs. Barker. Because her husband, Eric, was in the courtroom too. He was sitting right behind me with my husband. And I turned around and looked at him like, yeah. And he was just like, that's right. That's right. It's Mrs. Barker. It was so cute.
He had his Apple Watch on at the time, and we weren't allowed to have our phones in. And his watch kept saying your blood pressure's too high.
Right. I know, but he was just like, that's right. You tell him who you are.
Oh.
But there was like a palpable power shift in that moment. Like I saw it in you. Like I saw it in how you sat up.
Oh yeah.
And you were just kind of like, okay, can't swear in here, but you were just like, I am going to take back the power that was taken from me.
Mm-hmm.
And you owned that whole time on the stand. And I felt like you just came off of that. And Lauren too, you had so many amazing moments. I remember you're like slamming your fist down, like, I do have PTSD, and making him listen to you and making him not gaslight you on the stand. Like, you called him on every single thing. And so even though that was one of the hardest things I know that we've ever done, and of course all the others had similar moments, but I can't speak for them. It empowered us to speak our truth, to know who we were at that moment, and not let him define us. And I don't know about you, but even seeing him was kind of revelatory for me. I just remember thinking, you are pathetic. Like, I cannot believe how I let you control my life and my thinking and my conclusions about things. And so for me, speaking up and even pushing it to a lawsuit was so much more than just getting justice for myself. I felt like anyone who had ever been involved in API or IBLP, or had been even in the periphery and had been damaged, like secondhand damage, needed this lawsuit to legitimize their pain, right? To legitimize that our stories coming out were just the tip of the iceberg. And if you could acknowledge that he was wrong in this area, then you could also maybe look with honesty and wisdom at so many other things that you built your life on, that he taught, right? So to me, this was the house of cards, that if we could at least bring this forward to legitimize that what we were saying was true, that he did these things and he's covering up, what else has he bamboozled people with, right? And I know we've heard from so many people that the lawsuit was life-changing for them, in the fact that it caused them to critically think about everything else. And again, for that reason, it was all worth it.
Yes. Nobody, I think, people had tried to challenge him, but it was when it was that large of a group with Recovering Grace, and like we said, so many other people behind us and with us in this, it was just really hard at that point. People speaking out to say, okay, there's something wrong with this. And I think it took a couple generations too of growing up in this to say, what happened to these ATI students? What happened to all these students we saw on the stage that looked so perfect? Where did their lives end up? And that's, those were people speaking out, being like, this damaged me. This hurt me. Like having to acknowledge that maybe I don't want to put this, I don't want to put this on my children. I don't want my children to grow up in this situation. So what's right and wrong? Like, help me find the truth so this doesn't continue on to future generations.
Right.
And honestly, my parenting changed. I'm sorry. My parenting changed a lot over the years. Like, it was before really the lawsuit. It started before then. But when that really made me address the ways I had been taught and the way I parented by default.
Yeah.
And so we really changed our parenting in that season too. It changed so many things for us. Just the way we thought about things, the way, a good therapist, of course, is worth so much. I've been through quite a few different ones, some Christians, some non-Christians, some Nuthetic or just in the church, and some that are actually trained, and there's a big difference.
Yes.
And I think that's very important, because what we have experienced is not, you can't just send someone to a sexual abuse counselor. You can't just send someone to someone who's struggling with theology. You have to have something that's together. And I think that those have been, those people that have been able to speak into that situation with training and with empathy, have been really valuable. But so much changed in just the way we were able to articulate our stories. And from my experience, having talked to, at this point, thousands of people who've come out of this, it usually takes people about 10 years before they're willing to talk about it.
Yes,
I would agree.
And it's been a little different. Like we are now seeing a whole nother generation of survivors a little bit after Shiny Happy People and people that did, because the Duggars came in right as I was leaving. And so we have a whole nother generation. It changed as a program, not necessarily for the better, but it did change some. And so we're seeing a whole different type of people willing to confront things a little faster now, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what changed for me, and part of my growth is realizing that coming out of this mindset where I was so certain of truth, right? Because Gothard said it. So, and this was in the basic seminar, and this was in the advanced seminar. And of course, like white and black truth, right?
Right.
There was no uncertainty. There was no curiosity about other perspectives or points of view. And for me, this trajectory, along with going to school, I'm in a grad program now for organizational psychology, and my practicum, my internship, has been at a women's shelter near me, and that has taken it a whole nother level, because I'm confronted with my own privilege, like I had always thought, oh, I'm behind the 8 ball which is true. Like I grew up in this oppressive system. I wasn't allowed to go to college. And then, you get married and you're raising kids, and put my husband through college, and now I'm in my 40s. Like, this would have been way easier to start in my 20s, so now I'm behind and all that. But then I've had this moment, this realization that I actually have a lot of privilege to have a partner, and to have the means to go to school. My whiteness is a privilege. I have to say, I loved your conversation with Najina.
Yes.
A few days ago. That was such a beautiful conversation, and it tracks just so well with what I'm learning about minority communities and their lack of voice and the space to lean in. So I've taken a trauma-informed advocacy training. I'm also working on my wellness coaching too. But learning to lean in and listen. And that was a beautiful point that you kept bringing up, and Nagina kept bringing up too. To be curious about people that are not from our circles, and to expand your understanding, and to realize you don't hold the corner on truth and experiences, and to ask questions. And I feel like this has been an awakening. I know I've been accused of being woke, but if this is what woke is, then I want to be wide awake for it all. To have my eyes wide open to other people's suffering, and to lean in. That to me is what Jesus would do.
Yes.
Like, we're called to be Jesus followers. And I have a complicated relationship right now, I'll be honest, with church and Christianity. But I love Jesus. And I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get, I just want to be like Jesus. And I feel like his drive for truth, the only time he got mad in the scriptures was at religious leaders holding people in bondage. I'm sorry, Lauren.
No, don't apologize. I think it's beautiful. Your heart is beautiful. And I hold space for what you're feeling. And I think that everybody in our survivor community that's watching this can say, I mean, there's very few that say they did not come out of a domestic abuse or abuse and say they wrestled in their relationship with God. Because so much of what you're saying here is also been so permeated in our church. So even though they may not have worked with Bill Gothard directly, they have been impacted by these teachings where the vocabulary has been stripped from them, and they were in domestic abuse, and they wake up and they realize they have to face the truth because it's too painful any longer to live in the denial and the reality of it. Realize you're betrayed by religion is a really hard thing, because as I mentioned, like, religion was destroying my life, literally betrayed, left me out, and hung me to dry, crucified. Like, that's what religion did to my life. But religion also did that to Jesus's life too.
Exactly. So, and then that relationship is what draws you back in. And one thing I'm learning in my studies, and then experientially listening to these beautiful women at the shelter tell their experiences, and then realizing my own privilege, is that it's the quote by Gabor Mati. I don't know if you've heard of him, the Holocaust survivor and the psychologist. He's written lots of books and TED Talks. But he has this quote that is kind of like burned into me. That trauma is not just what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness.
Yes.
Trauma is not just what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. And I think that applies to people who were in a lawsuit, who left an abusive marriage, who have unnamed, unspoken trauma. There's a lack of empathetic witnesses in the world.
Oh, yes.
And if I'm given any platform, I don't have a official platform. I don't really want one either, but I want to be an empathetic witness. I want to empower other voices and listen. And this is a hard space to be in, but I feel, and Charis can chime in too, that we need the social courage that is produced when we empower each other's stories.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
That's been some of the most meaningful things to me as we've walked through this, is the people that have reached out. And been able to say, because we hear a lot, and I know you hear this, Rachel and Lauren, that, oh, that was such a brave thing to do, to go speak against Gothard. And I was like, I don't know that it was. Well, I didn't know I was signing up for something that needed bravery. I just signed up. It had to be done. Like, it was not
like, we gotta go.
Like, right. Oh, enough to do that. I would have never signed up if I'd known how hard it was going to be, probably. But at the same time, it has created an awareness. Of course, I do think that we are in a we've experienced multiple types of abuse that's been compounded. So most of our issues are complex, and our post-traumatic stress is complex. And so we have a lot of interesting integrations there, or the integrations we need to make. But what it has done to me is I've realized once again, I'm not alone.
Yes.
There are so many traumas in everyone around us. And once you start learning about yourself through the healing process, then you start seeing in other people, and it allows you to be a more empathetic person. It allows you to say, I see you and I'm holding that for you. And I can empathize in a way that I would have never known beforehand that was a thing, or even a way to, I wouldn't have known how to empathize with people. And I just see it so many more places now. And I think that it's a lot more common in it to varying degrees than we even realize. So, and like you said, like really wanting to know the heart of God and to love Jesus, but having really, really complicated relationship with the church. Like
we all
people that are willing to say, you know what, the church is broken. I get messages, you know, like how is saying this hurting the reputation of the church? I'm like, if God needs me to protect his reputation, I'm out. Like, that's not the God I serve does not need me. He pursues me because he wants me and he loves me, not because that I can help him look better.
And God wants truth known.
Yes,
I know.
Jesus wants the truth known. And so if the truth coming out is going to hurt the church, then so be it, because then something needs to happen. Something big needs to change. And if we have to be disobedient for that change to happen, then again, so be it. And if we vulnerably share about our lives on a film, and then you realize, oh, my neighbor's going to see this, and soccer moms are going to see this. It can get a little awkward, right? When I don't realize all my social circles that are like going to see all these intimate parts of my life. But at the same time, Brene Brown, one of my favorite people ever, you know, she says, vulnerability is the pathway to connection and courage. And I have found any time that I have been vulnerable and brave in sharing something, it connects me to somebody, because everyone has that experience of something that is maybe shameful or something in their past. And by you saying it first, then it gives them unconscious permission to say something else. And then you have a connection, and then you have built social courage together, right?
Yes.
And there's just not enough of that. We are so isolated, especially after COVID and politics and racial stuff. You know, that's why it was, again, so beautiful to bring on Najina we need to lean in to the hard conversations, both in the church and in our communities, and realize that there's a common denominator of vulnerability for hard things, right? And to be curious about each other and to be supportive of each other, so we don't suffer alone. You know, shame just breeds and grows in silence.
Yes.
And so when you bring it to the light, which is what I know our heart is to do through this film, and that's what I hold on to, that the cost of sharing something vulnerably will actually be rewarded in people's understanding that they're not alone, that there's options, there's a way to go through it and to recover, and for it to be like a broader connecting piece for survivors on any level, you know?
Right. And I think it's important too that not just have we, part of all this process as we've worked through different aspects of healing together, is that we had to first tell the truth about what had happened to us. That's really important, to be able to speak and say what happened. That's one of the first steps you learn in recovery, right? And is be honest about what happened. And then as we've moved through this journey, like being honest and well, just vulnerable, but honest about what is happening. Because I think especially in the church, and this is where that spiritual abuse factor plays in, very strongly is that the church only wants pretty stories.
Yeah.
To be, and then we all
testimonies,
and it was wrapped up with a pretty bow, and we all, sat down to Christmas dinner together, and we can give a testimony about it next Easter. That's not how it happens.
Right.
Yes. And it's been a messy, hard journey, and none of it's there. I mean, there are parts of it that are beautiful, and there are glimmers of hope that I see, but it's not been fun.
No, I don't think it's been fun. Yes. And I wanted to say, are you done? I didn't interrupt you.
No, that was pretty much my point. I just think that's important. Like, people don't understand that not just telling the truth is painful in the church because the church doesn't like it, but healing, they don't want to deal with the healing stories either.
Oh, and can we talk about spiritual bypassing?
Yes.
Okay. I wrote this down.
I got a scholar.
My eyes are old, and I wrote it on a sticky because I was like, I have to tell these girls this, because you probably have heard this term, but I didn't realize that it's actually a psychological phrase. Mm-hmm. So the psychologist John Wellwood first coined this phrase, and I guess people say you coin it if it's put in a research journal for the first time and you're the one that said it. But spiritual bypassing is using spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep personal or emotional unfinished business. When I read that and I heard it was actually an official psychological term, it blew my mind, because I was like, this is always what I have encountered in the church, or when you start to share something or concerns or spirituality is great, right? When it helps us rise above difficulties or grounds us through difficulties. But if it's a way to suppress or ignore the emotions instead of being curious, then you bypass it, right? Instead of looking at it straight on and going through the mess, the not fun process of healing and recovery, and calling it what it is. Yes. Sometimes you have to call poop out. I don't know that I could say the other word, that is what Jesus would love for us to do, right?
Yes.
Is to call it out. And emotions are always information about what's going on inside. So the more that I process this, and some of this, I know, Charis, you and I have talked about this before, and Lauren, I'm sure you'd agree. I wish I could take what I understand now about trauma and trauma responses back to myself, 20, 30 years ago too, but even during the lawsuit, and understanding each other better and understanding our very different trauma responses, and maybe understanding little squibbles and personalities. I think that would have gone so much better.
Well, I think back in the early days of those groups where we were first finding each other, a lot of us were finding our voices, and we were like, I will not be quiet, and you can tell me what to think. And people had not learned, we had not done the work to listen well.
Yes.
I'm so grateful for the people. And honestly, I could tell you the names of a couple. I couldn't tell you the names of the majority, because most people I don't remember. But I remember there were just several people that responded in grace to me and challenged my thinking.
Yes.
Have you considered?
Yes.
Or have you considered that? Or have you considered how this worked or how that worked? Maybe it didn't happen the same for you as it happened to other people. And then realize how I was doing that to other survivors.
Right.
And there's been some good conversation following that. Even recently, another survivor and I reconnected, and we both apologized to each other for some ways we had been rude in the past, and just in not having done the work yet.
Yeah.
And that was really meaningful exchange. I mean, it was brief, and we're not like besties or anything, but we acknowledged where we were and where we've grown, and being able to empathize with each other's situation. And that, I think that's been kind of beautiful to watch too, because I remember those first early days of those it was interesting, as we all had to grapple with a lot of very strong emotions.
Yeah.
And I feel like y'all really held space for a lot of those things. And we're, all of us are very personal friends. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but yeah, we're all friends. And so like, we know what's going on in each other's lives and talking about those things. And something I just want to point out is that that is so important to have that community and to feel that was part of my healing, was the fact that when I reached out to Recovering Grace and said, I know Meg, I need to talk to her. I read her letter. I know this story. Is she listened? And then I came to you all and you listened. And I just going to go very briefly as I talk about my story, don't have much about, is I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and I've been taught to be silenced. Nobody had held space for me at all. Like it was just me and Jesus. And Bill Gothard was spiritual bypassing. What's wrong with you? Why can't you get over this? Read these verses. You have a temporal mindset because you feel pain in your heart. Nobody held space. And I learned to shove everything in my heart and not talk and give the greatest, brightest testimonies and just shove it all in. And inside I was dying because I wanted to be known. I wanted somebody to sit with me and weep and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. And when I came forward, I found that in this group. I can reach out. There's other ones that are not here today that are part of the trailer that are a huge part of our lives and beautiful souls, beautiful stories. And, you know, and just like being able to be heard and to be understood and to say, this is healing, because when we hold space for somebody's story, it rewires your brain. It rewires neurological pathways, and we're able to feel that love and that acceptance and to view ourselves differently and to view God differently. And I think the church so much has suppressed, and I know God, there's great churches out there and we're making great strides in the churches. I'm grateful, but still the church has suppressed so much of our voices and say, no, that's too messy. I don't want to hear that. I don't have the answers for that. But really, we don't want the answers. We just want you to sit and weep and cry with us and say, Jesus loves you. He's there, you know, and let me hold your hand and let me walk with you through this. Don't just give me Bible verses and tell me God loves me and it's all going to be okay, because it's not sometimes all going to be okay. It's going to be hard.
Absolutely.
It's so important to get this out and to share our journeys, because so many people feel alone and they think they don't have a community of us that we met. We are all together, you know, that talk to each other. They're alone. They're isolated in their own little journey. They just want somebody to listen and to believe them and to help give them words to what they're experiencing inside. They know they're dying and they're like, I don't know where else to go. And I think that's where it's so important, is to get this stuff out and to say, the truth will set you free. Going down deep into these painful places and sitting in what feels like literal death actually is free. Eventually, it might feel death for a while. You might want to have your friends close by, but it sets you free. It's the only way to find your way out. We weren't made to live in isolation and to shove it.
Go through it. Yeah, and I would say my heart is to just encourage, like Charis said, doing the hard work and educating yourself. It does not mean that going to college is the answer for everyone. That happens to be my particular journey, but you can educate yourself in so many ways. There's podcasts, there's books and articles and so many things that don't cost money. But for me, a huge eye-opener was going to formal education, especially, you know, from being homeschooled, having a GED. This has been such an eye-opening thing that I wish I had started on earlier. And yet, the season of life, I'm able to, with more experience in my mid-40s, I am able to like understand how terms fit experience. But I also want to encourage, I started at a community college and I love that. There are so many options, online options. Start with one class, ask for an advisor who specializes in non-traditional students, adult students. I got so much great support and ideas because I was like, I'm just going to do one class. I wanted to do psychology just to understand some of the crazy in here and also what I was experiencing. And I thought, that's all I can think of. I can't think of going beyond that. And that's totally fine. You know, just start small, even audit it. Maybe it'd be cheaper if you're like, I don't know that I can do it. And then it just got addicting because I realized it was just unlocking so many things of understanding and building connections too, right? So I will be the biggest supporter of community colleges as on-ramps that are relatively easy access. There's so many scholarship opportunities there. I started looking for some things, and a lot of things I didn't qualify for, but my advisor said oftentimes they have more money in the scholarship funds than they even have applicants. So look at what might fit your situation and just write honestly from your background. I mean, most of us who might be non-traditional, you have a story, you know, that could possibly get some help with funding your education, and let that be the fire that kind of stokes your curiosity and your insatiable appetite to know things and experience things and look at different perspectives and lean into someone from a different community or perspective that might be, your mind will just be expanded. And I love that going through this process of speaking up has opened up so many other things that I wasn't counting on, I did not see coming, but has enriched my life either with relationships or knowledge. And again, I wouldn't have chosen the difficult route if I knew it would have been that difficult. And yet seeing the rewards and the benefits of it, I would totally do it all again. So
I love that. And I love what you said about sometimes I think it's Brene Brown that also says our deepest pain can become our greatest passion.
yes.
You know, like I'm working here now, like all to peace, you know what I mean? And I love it, but like different things and what Charis is doing, like through our backgrounds is not all wasted. And God can take it and use it for good. And I don't mean that in a cliche way, because I don't like it people use it versus the cliche. But I do believe that the hard things we go through build within us a message, and they build within us a passion, and it gives us a unique eyes to see things that are needed that maybe other people would just dismiss, and go and pursue that which you see. God's put that on your heart. God's giving you that eyes to see for a reason, because you have a message. You have a place to feel. And I think out of trauma can birth some really beautiful passions and beautiful directions that we can go into. It's not all ruined. Yes, it does feel that way for a while. We've been in this 10 years, by the way, 10 years, and I'm still getting words, and I'm still struggling and wrestling through it. But it does lead to good.
I agree.
Yeah, it's been beautiful to watch Rachel go through that process of going back to school or starting school, I guess, whatever you want to call it, starting from the beginning. But it doesn't always look that way. And I know for some of us this is not a season I can go to school. I would really love to one day. I really would, just for the heck of it, because I love learning, and I know
you're a learner. Yes,
right.
I'm learning too, but I'm not going to school. I tried it, and I was like, nope, I cannot do this.
I want to validate that. I hope you guys hear that too. This isn't the path everyone has to go down. So I validate that perspective completely, because you are continuing to learn. You know, you haven't said, I know everything there is to know. There is no uncertainty in my life. You've gone after new learnings, and that makes all the difference.
It does. I mean, I tell my children this all the time. I'm like, if you can read, you can learn.
Yes.
And for so many of us that came out, and and this is where it can be different within families. But for me, before my journey out began, I was already married.
Yeah,
I already had children. I couldn't just be like, you know what, I don't want to live this way anymore. And then even, go to school or go get a job or whatever. Things were set in motion. We couldn't just, and I know this is the same for both of you. Like, it required a lot to be able to step out of that and be able to do that. So reading became my learning, and learning is what, it pushed me to seek healing. And now you don't even have to read. You can just listen to it all. So, even if you can't read, you can still learn. But we have put together a list of resources too, that I know you've discussed your privilege, Rachel. I also have, that's one of the things that has become evident to me, is that I am in a position to seek out therapy, to seek out someone who's trained in special ways in order to be able to handle my mess. But also, that's not for everybody. Sometimes it's a season, sometimes it's financial, but we have put together a list of resources as we've been working on this film, the documentary about healing. As they've tracked it over since 2019, when we were in Chicago together. We've also been gathering resources, books and podcasts and different courses and things that can be accessed often for free. So I think that that's important to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
We could put that.
Yes, that would be great. If you do you have a link to that?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if you,
I don't know how to do that.
If you send it to me when we're done, I will add it in the comment section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, of course, that's the homepage. Actually, untilthetruth.com. You can just Google that on our homepage, and it's just a tab, the resources section, and as well as the donation section, because we are this film. Oh, you got it. Yep, perfect. So you can just go to the resources tab on that for a lot of the things. And I see Tabitha Westbrook.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're actually on it too as a recommended therapist, because I've heard lots of great things about you.
Yeah.
So where was I going with that? Oh, I know they are looking for fundraising, because they are doing an independent release of this film. It is not, it doesn't have a big streamer like Amazon had for Shiny Happy People. And there are always pros and cons. I don't understand the film world. But the huge pro is that the directors of this film that we trust, that have earned our trust over the last almost 5 years now.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah. Are just fierce about protecting us, protecting the narrative, and making a different kind of film that has ever been made, focusing on the what now after this. And it's really focusing on our power. It feels extremely empowering, also vulnerable, but very empowering, that this is where we go, that this is how you beat a narcissist. This is how you beat an abuser. You thrive, you keep going, you go beyond what they had envisioned for you, right? And by recovering and healing and leaning into the hard work, you win. Hashtag winning, however that looks, even if it's messy, and even if we're like locking arms and, just trying to get through the next day with our tribe and putting one foot in front of the other, that's winning. And so I just put that out there, that of course we're not directing the film ourselves, but our heart is to see this widely shown, and they need sponsors, and there's an equity opportunity. And also just to realize, I feel like people don't understand that this is that they're fundraising through a 503c company. So these is tax deductible donations, because it's a social justice film. And so any money that you donate to this is actually a tax write-off, and then an equity investment for when the film is eventually finished, and then sold as is. I believe that's still the plan. Sold as is to a streamer. And there has just been so much feedback and so much just excitement, looking forward to the possibility of what this film might mean for survivors, not just Gothard survivors. That's what I love about our stories, because we've heard this from hundreds of people, literally. Our stories resonate with so many people who never even met him, don't even know what he did or what this was, because the thread of the narrative is the same with so many spiritual abusers and leaders. And so I really feel like this is going to be a really important film, but it can't be made without some direct support. to get it across the finish line. They're committed to making it, but it's just a matter of how soon it can be done if they get some fundraising help. So just want to put that out there.
Yes, and my hope too is that this film will change the way we look at and think about trauma, and it will begin to challenge us to question some of the, as we had an interview about Shining Head People with Emily, is to begin questioning some of the teachings that are within the church, and to begin questioning where are these things coming from? How are we dealing with survivors of abuse, of sexual abuse, domestic abuse, religious abuse? How are we treating them, and what does that look like? And hopefully opening up the space to begin, as you say in sharing stories, to begin talking about things and begin sitting and walking with people going through this, and being able to give them resources as well, and just kind of shift and change the conversation and the dynamics of how things are held. And there is things happening, and I feel excited because God is working in we're called to be, we do partner churches, and we do see churches that are open, and they do want to be safe places. They do want to be trauma informed. They do want to work with the oppressed, and feel that call and that passion on their heart. And so I'm excited about this, being able to connect and unite more people that have those hearts of Jesus, that say, I want to protect the oppressed. I want to protect the vulnerable among us. And so I'm hopeful this will open more doors of conversation along those lines, and be able to make change. So I'm excited for this film. The same as y'all. I think it would be great. Although it's like, I don't know if I want to talk about all these things. I'm like, if I don't talk about them and remain silent, then I don't give anybody else a voice to be able to understand. And I'm still processing. I don't want to keep going, but I'm still processing things. Like, there is still things that I'm still coming to terms and grips with, that it's been very much a layer thing for me. And like, I've never talked to being a childhood sexual abuse survivor. It's something nobody would even know about me. But I'm now like talking about that, and being willing to walk into that space, because I realize how much shame they put on me with their teachings. And I'm just grappling with that and realizing I don't even carry shame for that. Like, it's so deeply embedded. I'm still processing. I'm still healing. I'm still triggered. And so I just think that this is important stuff to talk about and to go into, because we need to shift and change. So hopefully somebody else, the light bulb goes off for them, and they're like, yes, me too. I'm not alone. There's hope of healing. So thank you guys, everybody, for joining us today. And I've dropped a link in the comment section to Until the Truth. So please check that out. It's our documentary. If you feel led to financially partner with Until the Truth, you can find that link in there. And we're excited. Hopefully in 2024, you'll be able to watch the documentary, and it should be really good. We'll have to come back and talk about it again.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good to see you.